Okay, I think we're at critical mass, so we can go ahead and get started. Folks, feel free to keep dropping your names in the chat with your pronouns. If you could also rename yourself before we head to breakout rooms by hitting the three dots in the upper right corner and add your pronouns in, that will help move along the conversation. And you can feel free to keep answering why centering Black voices matters to you. But I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off. I'm Diamond Hardiman. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the manager of News Voices Colorado. And I want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. It's so wonderful to be in this space with you all, especially after work hours. You could be anywhere, including your bed. So I'm thankful that you're here with us. But I wanted to thank everyone on behalf of all the collaborators on this report and on this event, including News Voices Colorado, which is a project of Free Press, as well as Colorado Media Project and the Colorado News Collaborative. We're really excited to take this journey to really explore what it will take to make a more just and equitable media system for Black Coloradans. And I want to give a most gracious thank you to our Black Voices Working Group members, who of course helped to create this report and will also be sharing some of their insights with you today. So let's get started. Nikki Giovanni, she said, if now isn't a good time for the truth, I don't see when we'll get to it. As we mentioned in the report, the context of Black voices is critical to understanding the purpose and goals set forth by this working group, and the report that you'll hear a little bit more about later tonight. The group came together during a time that has been defined by grief. We've been defined by grief because of a global pandemic that's still devastating Black communities. We came together while still mourning the lives of Black people murdered by police. The truth is that this is not the first time that Black people, and Black women in particular, as our panel is all Black women tonight, have had to show up with one foot in a future that's not yet existent and one foot in a past that is marred with sorrow, pain, and trauma. This is also not the first time that news media has been here, having a conversation about what can be done better for Black communities. If we take a moment to stretch ourselves back through time, we'll recall that much of what we know or don't know about the other moments in history similar to this is because of journalism and storytelling. What we know about the pain caused, the solutions brought forth, and the labor that is required to transform systems is what was written about it. What we know about the Black people who lived through these moments, what their lives were like, what brought them joy, is based on who told their stories and how they were told. What Black people in need of information knew about mutual aid, about how to keep themselves safe, about how to stay connected with one another in the midst of suffering, is based on what information sharing people and systems were in place. And when we hear about these moments and learn the names of Black queer organizers, Black women, and Black organizations that we didn't know before, many times it's because a journalist or a storyteller went looking for those names, those stories, and those visions for a future that white supremacy couldn't conceive. So when you ask me why the time is right now, which is the name of our event and the name of our report, I'll tell you it's because we're late. And I'll tell you that because we've been here before, we know what is required of us now. Black people in Aurora need information about APD now. Black Coloradans need stories that understand the nuance and history of the over-sexualization of Black men and the lack of support for Black survivors now. We need stories about how to resist the highest levels of gentrification in the nation now. So tonight, we're stepping into the right now and preparing for the not yet. You'll hear about the report, hear from some of our Black Voices Working Group members, and we'll discuss the in-depth action steps communities, newsrooms, and funders can collectively take to improve access to news and information that serves Black communities. So who's ready to hear about the report? And so the first slide, if Vanessa, if you could go back to the first slide, it kind of gives us a brief of what's in the report. So it centers Black voices. We put a lot of what we heard in these 3 working group sessions throughout the report. It includes 5 recommendations that have in-depth action steps. It includes examples from Colorado and all over the nation, and it has a list of resources for people who want to learn more. You can hit the next slide. A little bit about the process that we went through. We had 3 working group sessions. So the first one was about information needs. So what are the critical information issues for Black community members and where are their gaps? Session 2 was about how communities share information. So we did community mapping and kind of mapped out the assets and resources that we have to uplift those information needs and those gaps, and also identified where we could activate some of our resources. And then session 3 is what change looks like. And in that session, we did a visioning exercise where a lot of these recommendations came from. We had our working group members think about a headline in the future about Black voices and what it would entail. And that's where we came to where we are, where we want to be. And this report is the steps to get there, partially. You can hit the next slide. So the major themes that the 5 recommendations touch on are engaging with historical context between newsrooms and Black communities, increasing content created for and by Black Coloradans, and creating structures and tools to help Black communities hold media and other institutions accountable. And so now we can get into some of the recommendations. So the first one is about naming and acknowledging harm. So we came to this one because we heard a lot of feedback when we were creating this working group about the ways that local news has harmed Black communities and eroded trust, and how that leads to a hesitancy to collaborate because of that historic mistreatment. And so for there to be any room to build, to foster relationships, and to create reciprocal and trusting relationships, we need to be able to acknowledge this harm, uncover it, and make a commitment to addressing it. You can hit the next slide. So, thank you. So the second slide is about amplifying the voices of Black Coloradans. So in this one, we talked about the lack of representation of Black voices in newsrooms, but we really also talked about how there's no nuance in a lot of these stories. There's super positive or super negative, but it doesn't, in the words of Tina, really get at the stuff of life. And so although there aren't Black voices represented in high numbers in newsrooms, there are a lot of Black people in our communities doing the work to share information. And so this one is really about how we can amplify that work and collaborate with one another so that more people have more access to that information. You can hit the next slide. And so number 3 is about contributing to the growth of a vibrant Colorado press corps, especially with our young Black storytellers and storytellers that work in different areas of media. So this is another one where we're thinking about how there are not that many Black voices represented in newsrooms and in other media spaces. So we're thinking about what it will take to get, in the words of Amy, more Black people into high-level positions within media organizations, and how we can create space for youth to shadow people in different fields, including journalism, and really think about that pipeline. You can hit number 4. So number 4 is about building power in Black communities to hold media accountable. This recommendation came out of frustration with the lack of accountability when it comes to creating more equitable local news. So what kind of transparency can we offer? What kind of tools can we use? What kind of systems of feedback and conversation can we create so that Black communities can hold media accountable for their promises to Black communities and have opportunities to speak out and speak with them when they feel as though they've been harmed? And then our last recommendation, number 5, is about dedicating more resources to uncovering and examining things that disproportionately impact Black communities. So as a group of community organizers, journalists, funders, we were thinking about things that make impact and talking about how we push against the status quo. And this one, we understand the crucial role of investigative reporters in that, but also other people that add investigative elements to the media ecosystem and share stories like that. So Tashawn, another working group member who co-wrote a blog with me that went live on Monday, he said that there's a necessity for things like this to be able to call to attention how we can use our resources to fight against the status quo of institutions that are constantly perpetuating oppression in America. So I kind of flew through those slides, but I just wanted to give everyone an overview of what the report is, who made up the report, and what the biggest findings were, because we really want to get in today being able to talk to the people that helped bring it to life and helped make it what it was, and really give you an opportunity to engage with this report and really make it your own. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Tina, and we can go ahead and get started talking with some of our Black Voices Working Group members.
Hi all. I'm so glad to see so many familiar names, but also so many new names. And thank you for spending time with us this evening. Thank you, Diamond, very much for leading this project, for opening the door to this conversation, which is a continuation of conversations past, work past. And I really appreciate the Black Voices Working Group members and all the work they've done. Before I do a very quick introduction, is Gloria here?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here.
Hi, Glo. All righty. So we'll drop the more detailed bios. Ellison will drop them into the chat. She is on it. And there are also in the report. But I'll give you a very quick introduction to our four panelists. Of course, Diamond is the manager for News Voices Colorado, this project, and she has worked as a tenants' right advocate and an abolitionist, and she is just a dynamic leader. We have Amy Brown. I got to know Amy Brown through her work as an AmeriCorps Vista, I'm not sure, I guess they're called fellow at Open Media Foundation. And Amy has done a tremendous amount of work also in opening up conversations to help newsrooms diversify their hiring and their promotion and the pools of applicants that they're looking through. We have Gloria Neal. Many of you know Glo. She was a reporter and a TV personality, anchor, columnist, radio, right, all of it, and a presence around Denver for many years now, working as the Director of Public Affairs for the Mayor's Office. And then Tia Trent. And Tia works for Project Voice as a program facilitator. And I'm just getting to know Tia. I've gotten to know her through this process, but she works with Project Voice. And that's really what the main thing you need to know about her is this commitment to community and to young people and to the role young people have in shaping this conversation. Actually, they're crucial and critical to this conversation. So welcome to all of our panelists, and we'll get this show on the road. I want to start with actually the very first recommendation, which is the acknowledgement of harm. And I'd like for each of you to take this, and I'm curious to know for each of you, what is harm? What does that harm look like to you? And what have its consequences been? And Amy, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So for me, harm is the misrepresentation of the lives and lived experiences of the Black community. And something that we addressed, I want to say it was in the kickoff of the Black Voices group, was this exact question. And so an example that came to mind and something that I mentioned in that group was an incident that happened in my hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana. And it was of June of this year. So this was a month after George Floyd. And during this time, the nation was mobilizing and protesting against racial injustice as well as police brutality. And so the same was within my city. And this incident where protesters were protesting the removal of a Confederate statue that was housed within the city courthouse. And protesters were predominantly African-American and women. And so they were met with harassment and some allegedly of sexual nature by opposing armed members of a Confederate group. And so police were initially not on site when this initially broke out. And so a local Black gun, I think it was a Black gun group, or I'm sorry, Black I am so sorry, loss of words. Not It was a gun group, but that was by Black men. They showed up, I apologize, on site, offering protection for these protesters. And so this was not the story that was told of protection. The narrative was changed to one of fear and violence as images, racially charged images of these members of this Black gun corps were circulated. And so for me, this misrepresentation of Black lives and their lived experiences only perpetuates this, what's the word? It depreciates, I apologize, the perceived value of Black lives. And that consequence of this is a George Floyd or a Trayvon Martin.
Thank you, Amy. Who wants to go next?
I can go because Amy made me think of something very important as she was speaking. So again, around this narrative that gets put out. So we've been doing the March for Black Women Denver for about 3 years now. And the last March, the coverage was just really different and weird, right? Around Black men coming to support us and whether or not they had guns out. And so it really was a disruption, right? To the whole vibe of the march, of what we were trying to represent. And so it got put out that, you know, Black men are here with guns, and that's not what was happening. And so it does harm in that way because, you know, those Black men could be harmed in ways of the George Floyd, you know, Elijah McClain's, right? And so it does harm in those ways when our community is coming together and supporting each other. And then you get this divisiveness from other folks coming in.
Glow?
Turn my mic on. One of the things I want to really hone in on when you talk about what does harm look like? So harm to me in many ways shows up. I always say this, that, you know, I forget sometimes that I'm Black until somebody reminds me of it. And there's always someone who is non-Black who will remind me. And so harm for me is acting like Black folks are nothing more than dark-skinned white people. We are not the same. Yes, we all have livers and organs and all of these different things that are maybe of a different color, but in that sense, we are like one another. But when it comes to culture and how we have been, some would say deculturalized, but how that shows up in this society, we are very different. Our histories are different. How we comb our hair, the texture of our hair, our skin colors, all of those things, what it takes to protect our skin, all of those things are different. And how that shows up in the workplace, it's as though, you know, you're the one that's being difficult for even bringing out the differences and saying that you are not like that over there. It's like constantly being from the island of misfit toys, when in fact, you and everything that you bring should be valued for its uniqueness and its difference. And so the manifestation of all of that, specifically me, because I can't speak for everyone. Again, Black folks are not a monolithic group, but when I am in the workplace, that manifestation shows up me being responsible to me and me valuing what I bring to the table. For many others, especially white men, and quite frankly, even some Latino men, and Black men as well, it'll show up as that person is being difficult. That person is being challenging. That person is thinking she is more than. And so it is not just white people. It is the manifestation of many in this place we call America and in the workplace. When we show up, sometimes it is hard to show out, not because you don't have the skills, but because you got to bring it in. You got to contain it. You really have to not dumb it down, but take the shine off so that you don't overshine. And that has been across the board. That is the challenge. That is the harm, because it is a big enough world, a big enough space that everybody brings something unique that they too can showcase without taking the shine off of someone else. That's a secure workplace, but that is not in many cases of what we have.
Tia mentioned something that made me think of. She said divisive nature. And I feel like the media does have a divisive nature of what's acceptable and what's not. And if we highlighted more stories of different socioeconomic statuses of Black people that aren't just this perceived idea of what it is to be a successful Black person
Right.
versus what it looks like for the everyday Black person, if we're highlighting more positive stories that show that, that's another way to uplift and give dignity, but also does harm when we're only showing one side, your football player, your permed hair,
Okay.
the person that talks like me.
Right.
Lori, you had said something about this, that Black people are second-rate, dark-skinned white people. That's
Yeah,
something
what
we have
I
to
said
face.
was, let's be clear. I want, because you were onto
Sorry.
something. What I said was the harm is acting like Black people are nothing more than dark-skinned white people. When in
Yes.
fact, we are way more than that. We are not like them, just as they are not like us. One is not better than, but the history of us, of Black folks, is negated or is not as valued. And when we bring that to the fore, you are made to feel less than, or even, quite frankly, combative, because people don't want to recognize that. And to chime in just really quickly on what you said, Amy, you think about the news stories. How many times do reporters go out and the worst person that they could find to be on the news, the rollers in his or her hair, the, just completely being unkept, or it reinforces the stereotype. Doesn't mean that that person who is on the air right then, that person who's being interviewed, is a person that is lesser than. But what it does do is it reinforces a negative stereotype. And I have to think with my white colleagues, I say, why do you pick those people to put on the air? Well, we need a soundbite, we need it fast, we need somebody who folks are going to pay attention to. Then I say, go, keep going, go and get other people to interview. Don't put that person on the air, understanding, because I won't do it. I don't care if that soundbite is so sensationalistic. Give me somebody else who, if you can't conjugate a verb, at least you know how to spell a verb. Now, that might be a knock against Black people, but I will not help perpetuate those stereotypes to what you speak of.
So I want to bring Diamond into this. And Diamond, when we're talking about stereotypes and we're talking about harm, can you talk about how you absorb this, the kind of internalization of these stereotypes?
Yeah, we talked about, Tashana and I, in our blog about the kind of impact that that has when it's talking about only presenting certain things. It boxes you in and it causes harm that you have to impact. It boxes in what you think is possible. It boxes in what you think is acceptable. It boxes in our visions for what's possible for the future. When I was thinking about my piece on what harm is, and Gloria kind of brought up sensationalizing things, it made me think of crime stories and crime reporting, and how that is really a victim of that. And I think about how I used to work for a bail project. And at that bail project, what we would do is work with people that we had bailed out of jail to provide aftercare services. So housing, getting them to court, getting rides to court, and things like that. And as a undergrad, I was having to answer questions about the complex St. Louis jail system. I was having to talk to mothers who didn't know where their sons were. I was having to be a housing coordinator. I was having to be a job advocate. And when we're thinking about crime reporting and how we juxtapose crime and safety, I really think about the harm that was done there when we could have had reporting, when we could have had information on where we could find how to navigate jail systems, where we could find housing, where we could find support, and all of those things. So when I think about sensationalization and the impacts and the ways that it keeps us from imagining more, that's kind of what I think about when I talk about internalizing that.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much to unpack there. I do want to, when we're speaking about harm and we're speaking about I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about stuff that we talked about in the report about the lack of Black journalists, the lack of Black editors, the lack of understanding of a very distinct history, the fact that we have gone over this ground again and again, that need for education, that need for nuance. And I want to go back, let me find that real quick. I want to go back to something you said in your introduction real quick, Diamond, because I think we should talk about this. You said Black Coloradans need stories that understand the nuance and history of the over-sexualization of Black men and the lack of support for Black survivors now. And yesterday, hundreds of Denver public school students walked out of class calling for DPS school board member Tay Anderson, the only Black member of the board, to step down over sexual assault allegations that investigators have determined are unsubstantiated. And some members of Denver's Black community have been fiercely critical of how some local newsrooms covered the story, which was initially sparked by anonymous secondhand allegations. And so, Diamond, this is happening right now. How does this controversy kind of speak to the need you mentioned for this nuanced stories? And, we don't do nuance all that well in newsrooms. So how does it speak to that need for nuance that educates, and really to the demand for change that the Black Voices report lays out?
Yeah, the time is right now. That title came from Gloria, and it's really been so true. But I think there's so much at play in this situation, and so much complexity. But I've really had my ears to the streets and been thinking about news coverage and information and what role that's playing in it. And when I'm listening to folks within the Black community and outside the Black community, a lot of what they're talking about is the gaps that's been missing because of the lack of Black context of Black history. They're talking about Black people and their needs not being centered in informing that coverage, right? So we're talking about Black history and also the needs of Black folks that need information for survivors of sexual assault, people that need that history and that nuance to understand all the layers and all the complexity that's going on here. But what I've been hearing is like, people want stories in context with the history of criminalization of Black men and of Black people, especially when we're talking about white accusers and Black men. They're looking for Black survivors of sexual assault. They're thinking about stories and the ways that they increase invisibilization and the violence that's really extracted on them because there's not information, there's not that nuance, there's not that history. And then I'm also thinking about, aside from that nuance and the contextualization, I'm thinking Black people want feedback loops. They want spaces to be able to discuss coverage of our community. We want spaces to be able to provide feedback about how we need this nuance and what's missing and what we're not hearing and what we need. But what spaces are Black community members being invited into? Who's reaching out to them for questions about this feedback, for questions about this coverage? So when Black community members are critical of this coverage, it's because there's been an arc that they haven't been able to be inserted into because they haven't been invited into it. And so we're doing it in our own spaces and we're doing it in our own communities. But yeah, we want accountability mechanisms, especially for coverage when stories cause harm because of their context or because of their lack of context or information.
And I'll also chime in, Diamond, because I think in many ways you just gave us that entire forest, because you're absolutely right, that context and really understanding how we got here. But if I am looking at the tree, and I know that Tina brought up Tay Anderson, that is extremely complex because we're not just talking about an individual who had these allegations. We're talking about an individual who had tremendous coverage, friend or foe, as it relates to politics and protests and all of those things that come into play for this individual. So it wasn't just about, I think for many people, it is not just about, including the students, it's not just about, these sexual allegations. You got people on both sides who either have a great deal of respect or who don't have a great deal of respect or like or don't like this one person. And so as it relates to, because if you think, well, you know what, If we're looking at this Black man versus Kay Anderson, what's the difference? Well, there is a tremendous amount of difference when you look at being elected to the school board and all the things. And there are tremendous, allegations that were unsubstantiated, and that just added murkiness to the water, right? There was no clarification, but I think it just caused people to dig in. What was refreshing, regardless of agree or disagree, there were students who took to the streets and students who said, we are going to speak up. We want our voices heard. But I think all in all, that is an extremely complex example of some of the challenges, whether you are friend or foe of this individual. But just as Diamond says all the time, it's bigger than one individual, and how we have to look at this from a collective standpoint, because just like Black people want to be treated fairly, they also want the truth, right? They also want to make sure that by and large, that people, especially if they are around children, are telling the truth, are being truthful, are being honest, are being accountable. And so those are the things that we look at regardless of who's involved. You want to make sure that your child is safe, and is not being preyed upon. And I'm not talking about Tay Anderson. I'm talking about just overall when you send your child to school. And so there's a lot to unpack there, Tina, but I hope that helps with just some of what you were asking about in this particular instance.
Yeah, it's absolutely complicated. It's complicated within the community. And it's probably a very good moment for reflection in newsrooms as we look about who we have in our newsrooms, what our connections are to community. Does that feedback loop exist? How might we improve? So I appreciate that. And, as I look at the four of you, and I know that you each are juggling about 10 million different things in your lives right now. And you took on this work to be part of this group, to be part of this conversation, full aware that, again, that this is something that's been happening for a long time, and it's a cyclical thing, and sometimes things change and sometimes they don't. And I just like to get a little bit personal and ask each of you why. What does this mean to you? We have a report. I'm hoping this report has a life and it has a heartbeat, and it sends out these ripple effects. But for each of you, what does it mean? Why would you invested time and a lot of emotional energy?
So I'll kick it off. When you start talking about where we are in history, I don't ever remember a time seeing white women and white kids and white men with signs that say Black Lives Matter. I don't ever remember a time where we moved the needle, where the death, the murder, the killing of Black men and women and children garnered enough of a, let's stop eating this dinner and let's look at where we are in society. And I don't ever remember a time looking in the mirror thinking, you know what? How are you moving the needle? Yeah, you're busy. Everybody is busy. But do you live on this planet? When your nieces and nephews look at you in 20 years or 15 years, or heck, as fast as they're growing up in 10 years, and say, what did you do? What kind of change did you affect? Did you affect? Did you really step out there? You don't have to do a lot. I always say this, but you got to do something if you want to leave it better than you found it. And it's just that simple. We and this society, I even look at the role that you're playing, Tina. And some people would say, why is what they perceive as a white woman, right? Because I know you, I know better. But what they would perceive, why is she facilitating this group of Black women? And why? We need allies. We need people to buy the brand, to believe it. Black folks have been saying this forever. It's time for white people and Latinos and all of us. If we're on this big blue marble, everybody needs to step up and contribute. And that's why it's important for me.
Who wants to jump in? All right, I'm going to pick Tia.
I would say that this is important to me because you know, we need to leave a legacy, right, for our youth, right? And where do they start, right? So they need some type of, you know, some type of guidance, right? Because they're going to be taking over everything, right? It's not us, right? And so if we are able to, you know, set the stage for them to be able to just come in and take over that's why it's important to me, because youth are the future, right? This is what we do. We serve the youth so that the youth can learn these things early on. So they're not our age, right? Learning all of these things and then trying to go out and be like, how can I support? How can I help? Right. And so that's why I really do it. I look at the different populations of youth that I've worked with in treatment facilities, right, at colleges, at Project Voice. And our youth have so much to bring to this world. And if we can just, you know, get them on that path, then they'll be able to spread their wings and just do whatever is necessary and possible, right? We have lived our lives, right? We can give them what we have, but it's them really that needs to be at the forefront of a lot of these movements, especially around media. You know, this past summer when I worked with youth, they talked about white supremacy. They talked about health in school and how nobody, you know, the teachers, nobody's there to help them, right? They talked about cultural appropriation in hair, right? And the images that they see, and they don't see themselves in these images, right? And so if we're able to just start this blueprint for them, then I think it's going to be perfect, because they're the ones that are going to take over for us.
That's awesome, Tia. I'll go ahead and follow behind her. So why is this important to me? I feel like now with the momentum after this past summer, we have finally got a seat at the table. And I can't remember who mentioned it about not having a place in the space, but now it's not about looking for that seat. We now have to pull up a chair, and I'm pulling up a chair, and as a community member I want to be involved because I know the influence that the media has. We spoke before this in a prep meeting about how I was personally affected by a reporter getting fired over because of her hair, and that changed how I decided to present myself by perming my hair. And because that's how I thought that was the only way I was going to be able to get a job after I graduated from college. And so the media is so important because it has such a huge influence. And so this work is important to me, no matter how small. My community involvement is just being a part of this group because I know how it's going to turn the needle, and I want Black people to be able to look at themselves and form this trust with the media that their story is going to be told in a dignified way. Something that I read recently, it was about show obstacles, not just outcomes, right? And so I hope that we can move towards telling this complete human story of our lived experience in our lives, good and the bad, because we deserve it and we're owed it. I'm tired of criminalism. We deserve it and we are owed it. So yes, this is very important to me. And I think Tina might have asked this question later, so I'll just hold because I'm just gonna keep going.
Tia says in the chat, she doesn't want a seat at the table. She said, this is also why I'm doing this. We need and are creating our own tables. So we are already running up against the clock. And so it flew as I thought it would. So I do want, let's see, I have 4 minutes. Can we do this in 4 minutes? So I guess I did want to know if there were other recommendations that really spoke to you, but I think what we might just do is we have an audience here that's a mix. It's a mix of community members. It's a mix of journalists. It's a mix of funders, all the policymakers, all the people that you're calling to the table. And if you could speak directly to any of these constituencies or all of them and say, this is what I want. This is what I want you to think about. This is what I would like for you to do. This is what needs to happen. Can we do that? Can we do that quickly? And I want to start with Amy.
Yeah. Something that I would like to say to community members who are like, how can I get tapped in? How can I get involved? I know for me, my first barrier was thinking that I had to live through this experience of what the media is presenting, and that is just my plight as an African-American, and I have to walk through it. That's not the case. Get tapped in. Diamond mentioned this feedback loop. Let the media know when they got it right. Let them know when they get it wrong. Actively participate, whether or not that's through a group like this, through a Facebook forum, or just showing up. There's so many ways that you can get involved, and it doesn't have to be big. These recommendations are some big steps, but you can just take that small step of joining a forum. So tap in, get tapped in. Community engagement is so important.
Excellent. Tia.
And I would say, to add on to what Amy just said, I would say read the room. A lot of folks don't read the room. Read the room.
Glo, I would like for you to talk to this specifically as somebody who was a longtime journalist who's familiar with newsrooms. If you could speak to that constituency of all, there's a lot of journalists on this call.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I would say is, if your sentence starts out with, well, you know, Glo, what can I do? I'm a white man. Or what can I do? I'm a white woman. I really can't do anything. You can do something. You can speak up. You can talk about what is clearly not there. As I watch news, or even look in newsrooms, or even talk to managers who say, Glo, we are trying to attract, you know, Black people, but, you know, they just don't want to come to Denver. I don't buy that. If you have to be intentional with what you are looking for, then be intentional. And that means across the board. That means that, because it's not just good enough in today's society to have one Black person on air and check the box and everybody else is, you know, white, or the majority white. That's not the street I live on. That's not the world I live in. Nor, here's a newsflash, white people, that's not the world you live in either, right? And so TV should reflect. And we, as viewers of TV, we should demand that reflection. It shouldn't just stop when our favorite sitcom is off. It should be in the news, in the special reports, and it should not be just during Hispanic Heritage Month or Black History Month, because Black history is American history. So if you look at this whole piece, you must constantly challenge. And so, as I said to many of my colleagues when I worked as a news anchor in Atlanta, they said, oh my God, I love being here because you have so many Black people on air in the room and all of that. I said to them, all Black isn't diverse either. You must look at each, and I want a diverse newsroom from all walks of life, from all socioeconomics, but I do know common sense tells me that it is more than one Black person on air. And so that becomes very important as I look at newsrooms across the board. And I look at, and by the way, all newsrooms are not about you're being young, and I know it's a visual medium, but I learned a lot from people that you have on segments like Rosemary Allen, and just different people who bring different perspectives. It just enriches the tapestry. And so that absolutely must come to being. And let me just say this really quickly. I know we had 4 minutes, I've blown it. But when you start talking about, I want to be on air, yes, this is a visual medium, but every Black person or every woman of color does not need to have straight hair. Wearing your natural hair is a statement that is positive for the masses to see, because that's the real world. I'll leave it there.
All right. Thank you. Diamond, you have the last word.
Okay, let me see if I can do it in 1 minute. I think I have two. One, my one really for our community and Black community is that this report is incomplete because you haven't invested, not invested, but you haven't been able to hold it, been able to make it your own, been able to make it come to life. Our Black Voices Working Group was small, and we understand that, but we understand that this is just a starting place, and we want it to grow, and we want it to continue to move forward. And I think my call to action for newsrooms and funders is that we've been calling it our Black Voices Report, but in the title, it's a call to action. And in the blog post, it's a demand. And the demand isn't just coming from the Black Voices Working Group members. It's coming from outside. It's coming from Colorado. It's coming from the nation. And demands require action now. So I think that that's my call to people. And demands require redistribution and for people to be bold. This isn't the time to play small or play scared. So I think that that's my call to action for folks.
Thank you, Diamond. All right, that's the time that we have for the panel discussion, and we will be taking questions. I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that we've got a clarification here real quick. I'm sorry, I lost track of what I'm supposed to do next. We're doing the Q&A next, right? If we've got any questions from the audience. Do we have any questions in the chat?
No, but I saw Beverly Grant had her hand up. Beverly.
Okay.
And let me jump in really quick. While we're grabbing questions from the audience, if folks could think about for the breakout rooms, which we'll be going to next after the Q&A, if you could think about which recommendation you want to engage with that speaks to you and change your name and put 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. That way we can put you in a breakout room based on which recommendation you're interested in. Hey, Beverly, go for it.
All right, thank you. A couple things came up for me when you all were just speaking about things. And Diamond, you were kind of getting on my page with intentionality. And there's not going to be any changes in the scape of newsrooms or media, period, if we aren't lobbied for, if space it's not a standard to welcome us or include us. We are normalized out of so many things. So dismantling this normalization that Black people are less than is where we have to begin. And because it's such a common practice and it's in every sector of society, we take it for granted. And so this is what has led to what exists today, of people, if it's a Black story versus a white story, why content is jaded. So some action steps that could be taken. There are many entities here. Each entity should commit to ensuring that people of color are on their staff or connected to them if they currently aren't. Also creating pathways. I liked how Tia and both Diamond talked about the importance of youth. So every one of these organizations that are here, we have capacity to create that. So thank you for listening to my ideas. I could keep going, but without intentional action, we're just going to keep having a conversation. And we have to go inside each organization represented here and say, how are we starting here to make the change?
Thank you so much, Beverly. Is Sharkia on this call by any chance? From CPR?
Oh, hi.
Hi. Okay, you know, when I heard the word intentionality, you came to mind. Do you mind just speaking a little bit about you? You really, and I wish I had my notebook in front of me, but you speak very plainly about intentionality, and what does that look like?
First, I want to introduce myself. My name is Sharkia Wedgeworth Hollowell. I am the new Outreach and Accountability Managing Editor at Colorado Public Radio. I'm a Denver native. So when we speak about intention, I tell so far I've been in this role since early summer. Mm-hmm. And my goals are for our reporters and for editors to be intentional. That means go out of our way to include people who don't look like us, go out of our way to be a part of the community. So being intentional means being present in those communities and doing things on purpose, going out of your way to go seek people who kind of put you out of your safe place. So that's where I'm working on those. These are little baby steps, but I'm enjoying what I'm hearing so far.
Good. Glad you're
Thank
here.
you so much. Thank you for being willing to be called upon. We have a question in the chat specifically about the sun, and in its staffing. It's when it started, it was as the questioner says, a very white project, and the question is really about what steps they've taken to become a more diverse newsroom. I can answer that, but I will say that the need for representation and building diversity on staff is not just a Sun problem. It's not just a Sun challenge, and you know, we are becoming much more aware when we speak about representation that we're not just talking about checking the box. We're not just talking about hiring. We are also talking about promotion. We are also talking about retention, all those things that speak to workplace culture. So as far as the Sun goes, the Sun's most recent hires, and I think the newsroom that is probably, in my mind, the newsroom that is actually as intentional as the Sun is being right now is CPR. And Channel 9 is also taking some pretty big steps, but the Sun right now, I think, is hired, I don't know, maybe of its last 5 or 6 hires, 4 have been people of color. They're just bringing on a new reporter who is a Black woman. They have several Asian staffers, and they need to get a Latino on there. But to my knowledge, that has not happened. The Sun is very aware of this, of this, and they've done work along those lines, including a summer camp for diverse youth as we talk about some of the pipeline issues. So that's what I know about the Sun. Amanda, I'm sorry, Amanda, Amanda, do you mind popping in to ask your question?
Sure. No, I was just wondering if you would share a little bit about the topic of tokenization and how it might have emerged as a theme in your conversations with Black journalists and leaders within the media industry.
Who wants to take that on the panel?
I can take it. Unless anyone else wants to pop in. But yeah, this is rooted in a lot of our recommendations and kind of what Tina just said around tokenization and how when we're talking about diversity, it's not just box checking. It's about comprehensive wholeness. It's about what Gloria was talking about what does it mean to not just be valued in part, but to be able to shine and to be able to give them the tools to shine and thrive for your talents, for your specific things that you bring that are different to newsrooms. And so tokenization really has an isolating effect in a lot of spaces that are media adjacent, in newsrooms. And it really serves to, like we talked about in the report, flatten Blackness. It doesn't have the nuance, it doesn't have the range to really give people the stories that have the complexity that is Blackness, and that is Blackness in Colorado. So that's kind of my take on it.
You know, and I also, that's absolutely right, Diamond. I'll even go even a step further. When you look at how, when you see someone Black who is on air and they are, and you know them personally, and you see what their delivery is, all of these things become very important if there is a difference, right? And I'm not talking about lacking professionalism, that's always across the board, but you can still bring yourself, and that self is very valued. On the flip side, I think, as I tell all of the individuals that I mentor, know your craft. Understand your craft in that if you are on air and don't just be happy to be there. Yes, you are on television. Television is a very powerful medium, but know your craft, know what you're talking about, understand that, be creative, but know what you are doing, because you don't want it said, or even you don't want it believed that you are there just because, well, this is the result of us trying to have this mission statement around DE&I and we're being inclusive, because when that goes bye-bye, then you have to think, oh my gosh, these people are not going to make the cut because they are not good at the craft. So understand the opportunity that you've been given because of the history that we're living, if and in fact that's the case. But you don't want to be a token. You want to be somebody who is worthy to be there based on your skill and your ability to rise up. You don't want to stay in one place. Go ahead.
Okay, we have just a couple of minutes, but there's a question in here. Oh, John Ferrugia says tokenism encompasses more than hiring. It can also extend to content, 100%. Vanessa Valle, she asks, what can we do in rural communities with few Black people, but many anti-Black racists? All right, we'll take that one.
I will say it takes courage to be you, but it takes if you're living in a community where speaking up and saying, I want to see more of that, or I want to know more about that story, and it's not the norm, that there could potentially be some backlash. You might be surprised to find that there are other people that may feel like you. I certainly have experienced where you get hate mail into the newsroom from the rural community saying, what is that Black person do? Why doesn't she press her hair? Or why doesn't she? All of those things. And I always found that it was incumbent upon a strong news director or a strong general manager as to whether or not that kind of email and foolishness gets to you. Just by being in your skin, that it is happening. But if you're not going to change, or you do not want it to affect the talent, then I don't see the reason that it needs to be even discussed. It's going to happen. And a lot of times it's coming from rural communities where there aren't people like you, but you must step up. This time in our history requires courage, more so than I think ever before, because it's too easy to get along, or go along to get along. But we see what we get when we go along to get along. Morally, it has been very, very challenging. We must stand up, journalists especially. I think when you're in rooms and you're being called names or people are not very welcoming, you are a journalist. It is a privilege. So grow the necessities that you need to speak up and be as strong as you need to be, because you are carrying a microphone, not just for the station, but for the people.
Thank you, Gloria. All right, we are at time. I have a technical question. If people continue to add questions to the chat and we go into the breakout rooms, do the questions disappear? Or are they still here? Can the panelists pop in and answer them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can.
Okay.
You can.
So I would encourage you, Marcus has a question in there, really good question. Please continue to add to the chat. Our panelists, as they have time, can pop in and respond. Others, please chime in. And I'm going to hand it over to Diamond so that Diamond can give the instructions for the breakout rooms. I hope that you all will stay for this. This was the same kind of structure that we opened Black Voices with, and the conversation discussion was really fed by what was happening in these small group, more intimate discussions. So thank you, Diamond.
Thank you, Tina. we are on such short time, but there's so much to cover and I have so many thoughts and I'm just gonna not say them all. But this is really good because it means that we can continue to have conversations and we can continue to do this and uncover all the very complex things that we're talking about tonight. What we're gonna do next is we're gonna go ahead and go into breakout rooms. And what we want from these breakout rooms is you're gonna choose your favorite recommendation. And then when you get into that breakout room, you're gonna have a PowerPoint that has some action steps listed along with that recommendation. Some for communities, some for funders, some for newsrooms. So as a group, you're gonna kind of lean towards one action step and you're going to act as though it is now your responsibility to implement this recommendation with this action step. So the kind of things that we're thinking about when we're thinking about our responsibility to implement these is who are the critical players involved? So who needs to be in on this? Who are key stakeholders? Who do we need to talk to? What newsrooms? Be specific. What people? What organizations? The second thing that we're going to ask is, what would it look like if people were really taking action on that action step? We've been talking a lot about accountability and transparency. So to you, what would signal to you that someone is doing this work? In other words, what would it mean if we were winning? So decide as a group in 3 things. What would the world look like? What would your community look like if we were winning on this action step? And then the third thing is, I really want people to think about who do they know that is already doing this work in Colorado or elsewhere? Because one thing that I learned through this process is the names of a lot of people that have been doing these initiatives, that have been behind the scenes, that have been doing this work. And we know that they're out there. So who are people that we can connect with? Who are people that we can support and redistribute resources to? So those are the big 3 things. I anticipate that'll take most of your time. You'll have 30 minutes and then we'll come back to the large group. But if you have extra time, a bonus is thinking about what are the challenges or barriers that there are going to be to being able to implement that action step. But right now, Allison is going to go ahead and put people into breakout rooms. And then we're going to go ahead and share that PowerPoint for everyone. Every room is going to have a facilitator, but when you get in the rooms, make sure that you introduce yourself. Our facilitators will help on note taking, but everyone will have access to the PowerPoint. And then think about who wants to do the share backs when we come back into the large group, and we can just go through groups. But I'll go ahead and stop there and maybe pass it over to Allison.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to ask again, if those of you who have not added that number next to your name, if you could go ahead and do that. If you're having some trouble with your computer or Zoom and cannot do that as a name, then just let us know via chat and we can use that. So I think Allison Cooper is working on that right now.
For the few people that are still in this room, if you haven't let us know where you'd like to go, please add it to your number or unmute and let me know so that we can send you to the right rooms. Thank you.
Hey, Allison, sorry. For some reason, my laptop's not letting me change my name, but if I could go into breakout room number 5, that'd be great.
Diamond, I'll just stay here. Does anybody else want to go in a breakout room corresponding with the different recommendations?
Diamond, should I go into one or stay here?
I think Diamond went into one. Tia, you're welcome
Oh,
to do. If there's one that you would like to join the conversation on, that would be great. We're just going to wait here in the main room. I'm just waiting here in case somebody comes in or needs something. But if you want to join a conversation, that would be great.
let's go to 5.
5.
Laura, I'm not familiar with the different designations of the rooms. I'd like to go into a room.
Okay, Gary, let me put, do you know how to see the chat?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to put it in the chat and you can pick what number you want.
Rachel, Linda, and Tia.
Number 5, please, Laura.
Got it.
And Tia would like 5 also.
All right. If it's okay, Rachel and Linda, I'm going to put you guys in Rec 1 because that is the rec that needs the most people.
Hi, Beverly.
Greetings. How are you all?
Doing fine. How are you?
Oh, excited and just love what you all are creating here.
Oh, that's good. It's good to see you. It's been a while.
For sure.
Raise your hand if you were cut off in the middle of your sentence.
Yeah, Diamond was getting into something really juicy and we got cut off.
To talk afterwards, Susan. But I know you're totally fine, Allison. I saw the clock and just didn't listen to it. But I think everyone is back. So we'll go by groups and we've got a little bit of time left and we want to make sure that we have time to wrap so that Sylvia and Melissa can talk about next steps. But does someone from group 1 kind of want to give a 1-minute spiel about what we talked about?
Well, I can go. I don't know that we got anywhere. We did a lot of dissecting how we got to where we are with the Tay Anderson story. Trying to look for a solution that we could get to. And I don't know that we got there just yet, but we did a lot of looking at what kind of went wrong. But I think in dissecting that and looking at it is really having those conversations before we're reporting, I think is a big part of what we should be doing more. Anybody else have, did I capture that? I don't know if Linda's still on here.
I think that Diamond had a really good suggestion about using some of the tools in restorative justice in those types of meetings. So having them led by people who are victims of the harm and having the people who caused the harm come in with a sense of sort of open heart and a sense of accountability. Those things might be difficult to achieve in this environment, but one can hope for that. And I liked that Diamond brought in, a different way to have a conversation than the normal ways we have conversations about media coverage.
Thank you, Susan. I'll pass it to the representative from group number 2. If you want to give us a recap of what was most interesting or what you talked about in your group.
I was the note taker, but if anyone else would like to share, feel free. I will go if nobody else wants to. Okay, well, never usually want staff to be the ones that take the lead, but if folks are not feeling it, I will sort of give a recap. We had really great discussion around recommendation number 2, which was about amplifying Black voices. And the thing that kept coming up is being intentionality about developing relationships, about seeking out other organizations and people that could connect people to other people in the community, being intentional about developing a diverse list of sources, being intentional about hiring and wanting to be able to develop strategies to attract more BIPOC people. There's also collaboration, invitations to collaborate and thinking about being strategic in your collaborations. So somebody said, making sure that we don't always go to the biggest organizations, that finding the right organization, sometimes smaller ones who have a deeper reach into the community. And making investments, right? So training people, providing grants, providing resources in order to amplify those voices, reaching out to Black students, Black journalists, and media creators and giving them opportunities, and doing a lot more listening and showing up to events to be able to continue the education and learning and relationship building in order to be able to do a good job of amplifying Black voices. If I missed anything, please put it in the chat or chime in.
Thank you, Vanessa Maria. So many action steps that we can really just start working on right now, because the time is right now. Number 3, group 3. Do you have any representatives that want to share?
Well, I'm reluctantly being tapped, and thank you, Sylvia, for leading us. We did not have any Black participants in our group, so we just first wanted to acknowledge that it was a little awkward for us to be thinking about how to cultivate a Black press corps. We thought that might be telling, that there weren't any Black participants with us. So we just kind of sat with that for a bit. But, we did talk about, the concern of tokenizing and just thinking that you need to get Black interns into the pipeline at these lower levels. And so we really focused on how do we support Black journalists who are in newsrooms? How do we make sure that the culture that's there is supportive of their, professional development and growth? And then also, talking about the, informal storytellers and how do we create more platforms there as well. So we identified, hold on, let me get the list up. We identified some national players that were doing a good job that we could think about how do we partner with them or hook people up with them nationally, like the Ida B. Wells Society has a lot of fellowship and training for journalists and specifically journalists of color to advance them in their careers. Nicole Hannah-Jones and the program at Howard University. The National Association of Black Journalists, which isn't really active here to my understanding. Diamond, last time we talked about that, but just, and then we talked about the group that the Journalists of Color group that Tina and others were kind of getting together informally at COLab. Held a lot of promise for fellowship and kind of building relationships across newsrooms, and also the Trends Equity Reporting Fellowship that Timo was a part of our group, hosted in Boulder and just the promise for that to be something powerful for us, for maybe COLab or others to put on. So yeah, that is what we talked about.
Awesome. Thank you, group 3. Group 4. Who wants to talk for group 4?
The group 4 discussion was really led by Beverly and Tish. So I nominate Beverly or Tish.
Miss Beverly, do you want to go, or you want me to handle this? Okay, I don't think I see her or hear her. She may have stepped away for a minute. This is Tish. Good evening, everybody. We had a great discussion in group 4, and we're talking about how to leverage power of the Black community in the media to make a greater presence. And we talked about a variety of things surrounding this particular issue. And Beverly so eloquently had pointed out that part of the problem was the strong Black communities that we had in the past here in Colorado, such as Montbello, Park Hill, 5 Points, and the what's considered to be Highlands. All of this was Black and brown areas occupied by Black and brown families. And just discussing how, because of gentrification and other factors, those elements of that consolidated power, which, converted itself into political, social, economic power, was disintegrated from the inside out because of regentrification. And that power structure changed. And because of it, we've been left a bit siloed and isolated in sparing pieces throughout Colorado. So we were talking about building allyship with people in power to bring together these powerful, but yet still, somewhat, for lack of a better term, disintegrated communities, which are our Black and brown communities, and trying to reconsolidate that power, but doing it with trusted allies in elevating our message, but also creating different and more creative ways to get the message out, and not just relying on paid media and paid journalists, and getting our community message out from community members, from our children, from stewards of these very highly regarded neighborhoods. Park Hill has a great history. Montbello has a great history. The West Side has a great history. We all, have great histories here that have been overlooked because we've been taken over by regentrification. And because of that, our message in the media has been diluted, if not all, but evaporated. And when we do get messages out, they are not favorable, or they're highly distorted because the narrative is predetermined. So what we have come up with is creating our own source of media organically from our neighborhoods, appointing stewards, and also reaching out for allies to build those bridges between our fractured communities to re-empower ourselves and elevate our voice.
And I agree with everything Tish said. I just wanted to add that part of building power is having your voice heard, which is why we wanted to have a focus on focusing on schools, focusing on community, institution, faith-based community, small businesses, looking at getting to us through all of these sectors, and then having literally like a weather watcher, a community news input person, where, these stories, number one, are valued and have a place to be shared and showcased. Also, along with the intentional development of pathways, so that youth are mentored and excited about having a career in media. because we've planted these seeds through building allyships in schools, etc. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, group number 4. Group number 5, if you could give us a highlight in about 1 minute, and I'll pass it over to Sylvia to wrap us and close us for the night.
I was a note
I would say
taker. Oh, go for it.
Oh, are you okay? Okay. I think we heard some legitimate frustration about, we talk about this and talk about this and talk about this, and is it really, why is it that hard? Was one point, and another point was like, you know, why isn't there more of this happening, more resources devoted to coverage of these issues? And the simple answer to that is each news organization has to take responsibility for acting on that, and not expecting somebody else to do it for them, not constantly looking to the community to help us, you know, like solve the problem, devote resources, and prove that you are committed to it over time. And it's got to be sustained, and it's got to be genuine, and it's got to be about more than recruiting. And it needs to be about like really being interested in learning and reporting on these communities, that is above and beyond positive stories about them that are sort of easy to get in some cases, but you know, deep stories that are hard and complicated and time consuming and investigative and have all those qualities. So we think that that's the best answer to that question about resources.
Wow, thank you, Group 5. I'm so excited hearing all these ideas, and I'm gonna drop my information into the chat so that we can keep these conversations going. And I encourage everybody else to do the same and to stay in contact and keep adding more and more to this conversation. I'm gonna pass it over to Sylvia and Melissa to close.
Carmen, can I just do a quick plug that we are continuing this conversation on our Facebook Live show. It's called Free Press Live, tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Mountain Time. I put the links in the chat, and we'll be talking with Diamond and Amy Brown more about how to implement these. So don't miss it. It'll be good. And if you can't catch it live, the videos will be archived on our Free Press pages. So check out the links below. All right, that's my PSA. Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for showing up today. It's been great to be part of this conversation. Just to introduce myself briefly, Sylvia Solis with COLab, one of the organizations that supported Diamond throughout this process for this work. We're going to be doing more events, like Vanessa mentioned, one happening tomorrow. I'm also adding a link for a page on our website, COLab's website, with a list of the other upcoming events throughout this week. So you can tune in and see what's happening, the conversation on social media, and other information about this work. I will also be dropping a link if you want to get more information or are interested in becoming a member of this group and, you know, having more active conversations about this in the future. Please use that link. Allison, if you can copy and paste that on the link to sign up. And I will be following up with you personally with more information and next steps. Again, thank you for your time, to all the panelists for being here and sharing some of your experiences and your perspective. Diamond, for moderating, you know, facilitating the beginning of this conversation, and Tina too for your you know, guidance around some of those tough questions. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to add my contact information too. Otherwise, you'll hear more from us coming up in the next few weeks. Thank you again. Melissa, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll just share. I just want to echo everything Sylvia said. My name is Melissa Davis. I'm with the Gates Family Foundation. We're a place-based foundation that's been active in Colorado for over 75 years. And we also helped start something called the Colorado Media Project, which is doing a lot of support of the local media ecosystem and kind of helping to support some of the changes and innovations that that we're all talking about. I wanted to just recognize Diamond and say thank you for leading this work. It's just been such a wonderful experience, I think, for all of us, and especially thank you to the Black Voices Working Group for participating. Your time is just so valuable, and we appreciate you stepping up and coming up with these recommendations. And shout out to Philip, who used to work with me at the Colorado Media Project and got some of this work started at the last year in a very important way. So I also want to just kind of whet your appetite and just say that the Colorado Media Project, one of the things we do is pool funds from funders. And part of the exciting thing about this group is that, you know, you do have calls to action for funders and for newsrooms. And we know that takes resources, and that resources are often not distributed equitably. And because of that, one of the things we're doing in conjunction with not just this working group, but also as a result of what we'll hear in the coming months from the Latinx Voices Working Group and future working groups that COLab is planning to host. We're putting together an informed communities fund to have some open opportunity grant opportunities where you know, we leave it to you to put your best ideas forward, and we'll have some funding to get some of these projects started. So thank you to the Colorado Trust and the other funders that contribute to the media project, including Gates Family Foundation, Democracy Fund, Bohemian Foundation, the Colorado Health Foundation. And so look for that. We're targeting maybe about a November open date, but there will be some more if you're on our mailing list. If you're here, you're on our mailing list, and so you'll get information about that. So let those ideas percolate and start thinking with us about the types of things that need to be done to not just have this be one night, but be an ongoing movement. So thank you all again for your time, and I'll hand it, I guess, back to Sylvia maybe, or am I closing it?
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks all.
Email me. I want to talk to everyone.
Great job, Tina and Diamond. Thank you so very much. This was great to everyone. Have a good night.
Bye, Chloe. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You were fantastic.
Bravo, Diamond.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Good job, Diamond.
Thanks, Linda. Nice seeing you again.
It's good to see you too.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close the meeting.